A to Z Sports, Sam Phelan here with you live for Titans at 2, coming at you live from St. Thomas Sports Park. We just wrapped up the introductory press conference for Tennessee Titans' new head coach, Brian Callahan. So got some instant reactions for you guys this afternoon. Going to go over some of the clips that I found most interesting from Brian Callahan, the things that I'm taking away, whether it be about his personality, about his coaching style, about his thoughts on Will Levis, or what we can expect from the Titans moving forward. There was a lot. Brian Callahan spoke to the media for over half an hour, maybe even pushing close to 40 minutes that he was at the podium. So very informative, very thorough, and got some of the highlights here for you guys. Appreciate you guys hanging on. Joshua says, hey, more like Titans at 2:30. Hey, relax, Joshua. I'm coming actually rather fast for you guys this afternoon because the press conference didn't wrap until 1:45, and I had to shake some hands, wrap things up at the press conference, and then prepare some of the videos into the back end. So I'm proud of myself for getting ready to go at 2:30 here. So want to know what you guys think about Brian Callahan, if you guys tuned in to Brian Callahan's press conference here, and then break down some of my biggest takeaways as well. And a reminder that Titans at 2 is sponsored today by the Aura app, because anyone can find anything online. That includes your full name, your personal email, your home address, your phone number, even relatives. The Aura app is here to help protect you and do the hard work keeping you safe online. Aura found over 30 data brokers with my information, submitted opt-out requests on my behalf, and immediately had my information removed. So I'm no longer on lists for robocallers, telemarketers, spammers. I don't get the no caller ID on my phone or talk to robots on the other end because of Aura. They also have a VPN and a password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, and parental controls. Everything and anything you need to be safe online, Aura has. You can get a 2-week free trial with the Aura app by going to our link, aura.com/ATOZ, which is in the YouTube description if you're watching on YouTube. Aura.com/ATOZ is where you go. Interested, I'm just going to go to the gonna go to the chat here, see what you guys are thinking about Brian Callahan and what you guys are feeling this afternoon. Somebody says they like the fact that running is still the identity. Surprised nobody brought up his thoughts on Derrick Henry. One of those questions coming. Brian Callahan made it very clear he's not trying to get too in the weeds about some of the things. This was more of a big picture. Yes, he talked about Will Levis specifically because there is certainty that Will Levis is going to be the quarterback of this team. Said running is our identity. I don't really know if I agree with that. He said running has been part of the identity in Nashville with Titans football for a while, but did not say that running would be the identity. Actually, when asked some of the things that he wants to make sure he does, he talked about being innovative in the passing game. And as we know, elevating the play of his quarterback. So I guess we can start there. Brian Callahan on Will Levis, what he liked about him, and then why he felt like Will Levis made the Tennessee Titans an attractive destination to be a head coach.
Yeah, that part is attractive. I thought that Will was a really good player coming out of college, and I thought when you watch him play this year, you saw really growth. You saw him learn. The NFL is hard. It's hard on quarterbacks. It's particularly hard on young ones. And so I saw a lot of really positive things. Some of the throws, some of his competitive instincts that he put on tape were really impressive. And so I'm excited to dive more into that and how can he get better from year 1 to year 2 and keep putting him in position to have success, and so we can score some points on offense.
Brian?
I called Will I don't even know what day it is anymore, but I called Will a few days ago after I got the job, and then I saw him here today. He was working out, so I got a chance to catch up with him. I told him he's leaving town, I think, tomorrow morning, but he'll be back. But I've really enjoyed getting to know him. I can't wait to get to work with him. He's got a lot of really special physical talents that I'm excited to go see if we can make better. And everything about him so far has been fantastic, and I'm excited to get to go further down into it.
Brian, your catalog.
So there is Brian Callahan, and I see somebody said he told on himself. He said he almost said I talked to Will last week and ended up correcting himself, but he has been in contact with Will Levis, and clearly defined it right there. Some of the things that make being the Titans head coach attractive to Brian Callahan starts with the young quarterback that they have on the roster, and that was one thing that was emphasized very much by Ran, but also by Brian Callahan and Titans owner Amy Adams Strunk, who had a statement for the media at the beginning, where the Titans wanted Brian Callahan from the jump. From the moment they started their head coach search, he was their preferred target. But just as much, Brian Callahan wanted to be a Titan. He had some other interviews that were potentially scheduled for throughout this week that he ended up not going to and not seeing because being the Titans head coach was the thing that was important to him. Amy Adams Strunk said when he came in person to interview for the job, they didn't want to let him out of there without accepting the position. Brian Callahan said, look, I was about to make a plea to Ran, like, hey, man, give me this job, but he didn't have to. There was a ton of mutual interest here. And a lot of it has to do with, number one, the relationship between Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan, the chemistry that the two of them have, a palpable energy and chemistry. And the phrase that Rashid pointed out, where he said they are hunting together. It was some Ran Carthon buzzword phrase where he said hunting together is not the same as hunting at the same time. Maybe a little bit of shade being thrown at Mike Vrabel and the relationship that Ran and him had there. I don't know. But there seems to be a shared vision between Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan, or Ranahan or Callahan or whatever you want to call it, that the two of them are implementing. And a lot of that starts with Will Levis. My favorite thing about Brian Callahan is still the experience that he has with elite quarterbacks in the game. He has worked with Matthew Stafford. He has worked with Peyton Manning. He has obviously worked with Joe Burrow. He's worked with Derek Carr. He now worked with Jake Browning and learned how to innovate the Bengals offense from a Joe Burrow offense to a Jake Browning offense and still make it rather successful. Hearing Brian Callahan talk about what he looks for in a quarterback, how he can elevate a quarterback and adapt to different quarterbacks was really something that I'm intrigued to see him apply to Will Levis. I also think Matthew Stafford is a pretty good comparison for Will Levis just in terms of their traits. I feel like the two of them, like young Matthew Stafford, had that same competitive fire and competitive edge that he would just go put his body on the line to go pick up a first down. He had a huge arm and a lot of physical ability. I think there are some similarities to Will Levis, and Brian Callahan has already learned how to maximize Matthew Stafford's ability. He has been there side by side with him before. And so that is very, very exciting for sure. That is a big takeaway for me. And as Matt points out here, love that he brought up something where he said, you have to learn how to throw balance out the window when things are not working. You can go in with a game plan, but I think Titans fans were sick of banging their head against the wall, watching Mike Vrabel coach, watching Todd Downing or Tim Kelly be offensive coordinators, where it's just like run, 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 run all the time. Banging your head against the wall, doing the same thing that's not working. And so I believe Brian Callahan has the chops to be adaptable, change what he's doing offensively, and potentially, therefore, get a really dynamic, adaptive, innovative offense that is productive. I like what he said about defense, too. Find it very interesting. I think a lot of the times you talk about an offensive-minded head coach, and you're like, okay, well, he has no defensive experience. He doesn't know what he could be looking for on defense or how to run a good defense. But one thing Brian Callahan said is, hey, I've been so experienced with offense and as an offensive coordinator, as the longest tenured offensive coordinator in the league before taking the Titans head coaching job, that he knows what works because he knows what he's had to game plan against in the past. Cleveland Browns defense, good defense. Pittsburgh Steelers defense, traditionally good defense. Baltimore Ravens defense over the last 2 years have been the best defenses in the sport. Those are the defenses Brian Callahan has had to go up against in his division twice a year for the last 4 or 5 years since he's been in Cincinnati. So he said, look, I know what is difficult to game plan for as an offensive guy. I'm looking to have that same defense that flies to the football and is unpredictable and is a matchup nightmare for offensive-minded coaches. Can he do that himself? No, but maybe he can find the defensive coordinator who can. And I think it is worth noting that the Titans' first known defensive coordinator candidate that they've interviewed is from the Baltimore Ravens in their DB coach. So I think that will also be something to apply. Karen wants to know where you can get the press conference. Well, go to the A to Z Sports YouTube for all the clips of the press conference. The team will have something coming out here in the next few hours. But if you go to the A to Z Sports YouTube, after you're done watching Titans at 2, of course, Karen, you can go and check it all out there. Got a lot more to get to, including wide receivers, protection from the offensive line, what the coaching style is for Brian Callahan, and how he learned from adversity to turn things around during the bad years while he was in Cincinnati. We're going to get to all of that. Before we do it, I want to remind everybody about some of our sponsors today, one of them being NFL Flag Football and Titans Flag Football for boys and girls pre-K through 5th grade in and around Nashville with a once-a-week program on Sundays for a total of 2 hours. It's the Youth Titans NFL Flag Football Leagues. Again, in and around Nashville, once a week on Sundays, 2 total hours. Registration for the league will close on February 18th, and the season will start in March, going through May. So if you have a pre-K through 5th grader, sign them up, boys and girls in the Nashville area. The link is in the bio here. It's www.titansflagfootball.com to sign up. Also a reminder that we are sponsored by SNHU here at A to Z Sports, because we are driven by a passion for sports and building our careers in sports here at A to Z Sports. And so I get asked all the time, like, look, how'd you get your start in sports, or how did you start with your sports career? And if you're somebody who asks yourself that same question about how you can do it, you need to go to Southern New Hampshire University's online sports management program, which lets you turn your passion for sports into a degree. They'll get you started on a career path to be an athletic director, a sports information director, marketing manager, or other exciting roles in the sports industry. They have graduates working in the industry. They have faculty that teach their classes with real-world experience. Those are instant connections, which are crucial to getting started in sports. They're an accredited university with shockingly affordable tuition, and they are nonprofit. So go to snhu.com/ATOZ. It's linked in the description to see if you qualify for their sports management programs at SNHU. Let's get to some of the other good stuff here. What does Brian Callahan value in a wide receiver? I thought this was notable, where he referred to the selflessness of the Cincinnati Bengals wide receiving core.
Selfless, that's a big part. You got to have selfless guys. They're a huge part of the run game. They run routes to get other guys open. They work in tandem together. So that's an important part. That's a characteristic as far as physical traits go. You want guys that are big, strong, fast, and can catch. That's a pretty easy way to go about it. The more of those guys you have, the better you're going to be. So, but yeah, we have. I'd tell you what's great about and this is a huge compliment to those receivers in Cincinnati. Incredibly selfless. Love playing together. Know when their time that the ball could go anywhere, and so they never complained. Not once about who was getting catches or who was getting targets. They knew that at some point it would come for them, and so they just did their jobs every day. They practiced really hard. I thought that was the one thing that was really impressive about that group of players is their practice intensity. They get after it, and that's why we were good, is because of the way that they practice. So, yeah, I don't know if I kind of went on a tangent there. I apologize, but I hope that answered your question.
Yeah,
So there is what Brian Callahan had to say about wide receivers. So a lot to break down there about potentially, who the Titans might be targeting when you look at the NFL draft, when you look at free agency. I think there obviously is something to say about 2 wide receivers from Cincinnati in both T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, who are, about to be free agents and be on the open market. T. Higgins may get franchise tagged by the Cincinnati Bengals. That is always something that is possible. But as the Titans potentially look to address this need, Brian Callahan looks for wide receivers that are selfless and can really want to play together, that don't complain about not getting the ball, something he had in Cincinnati. Those are names to watch because Brian Callahan has worked with them before and knows the type of people that they are. So I think that is something to keep an eye on. Anthony has a quote comment here that I want to get to. Wants to say, we can live in reality without trying to sell rainbows. They're not good. Say that they've got a lot of work to do. Say it's going to take years, because it will. Well, number one thing I would say to Anthony is, one, Brian Callahan did say that. One of the things he said was, look, this is going to take a lot of hard work to turn this thing around. But he also has experience doing the same thing. And I'm not sure it's going to take years and years and years and years to fix. If you believe you have the right quarterback in Will Levis, which I do, I think a lot of Titans fans do, I think Brian Callahan does believe they have the right quarterback. Turning things around in the NFL from 6-11 to 11-6 or whatever it is does not actually take that long on paper. It can be done very quickly if you do things the right way. If you can sign the right free agents, if you can hit on some early draft picks, turning around the culture of an organization happens very fast. So Brian Callahan did say it would take hard work. He's not going to snap his fingers and have the Titans as a playoff contender again. But it is very possible to do and to do quickly. And if you need an example of that, look at the Cincinnati Bengals, where Brian Callahan started 0-11 his first year there. 2 years later was in the Super Bowl. He was asked, what did he learn about the hard times and turning around a losing organization that he can now apply to the Titans, who need to turn things around?
A lot of adversity in those early years. We didn't quite have the roster to compete with some of the teams we were playing against. But we saw in those dark days the core of what our team was going to be. There's a lot of players there in that first and second season that are still there now, and that were there for sort of the glory of it. But I learned that when that adversity strikes, consistency. Zach was an incredibly consistent leader. We just kept hammering the message, and we believed in what was happening, even though the wins weren't taking place. There wasn't the tangible evidence that this is what's happening, but we felt it. We saw it in the locker room. We knew at some point, as we kept building our roster, that we were going to be a really good football team. And our players believed it. Our coaches believed it. And those are good lessons to be through some of those lean years. I mean, 0-11 was not a fun place to be. But we learned a lot from it. And really the foundation of what our team became 2 years later was a lot of guys that had went through that process. And so you learn a lot about people when things are tough. We learned a lot about the guys in that football team, and there was a lot of them that were incredibly high character, loved playing football, and they helped us get out of those times as well. So, yeah, you learn the most when things aren't going very well. Everyone can be positive when you're winning a bunch of football games. So, yeah, those are probably incredible, intense learning experiences for me.
So there is Brian Callahan talking about what I guess the chat is now focused on here, which is how quickly can you turn this thing around? Nick points out a great point. Like, look at the Texans picking in the top 3 in the NFL draft last season, and then they're in the playoffs and winning playoff games this season. And Anthony does say, hey, you're right. If they do things the right way, relying on a brand new coach who didn't call plays to do things the right way. And there is some truth to that, right? Brian Callahan confirmed that he would be the Titans' offensive play caller. Brian Callahan did not call plays for the Cincinnati Bengals, but he had his fingerprints all over that offense. It was a collaborative effort between him and Zach Taylor to make that offense tick, and he's credited with a lot of the innovation that they did, especially when Joe Burrow went down and they had to innovate their offense to help Jake Browning. That's something they credit Brian Callahan with. He has been just as involved in those game plans beforehand as Zach Taylor was. And I think when you look at the body of work for Brian Callahan, there's every reason to have a lot of confidence that this is the guy that is able to teach, able to assess talent, and able to lead. as a head coach. It's something that I actually asked him about during the press conference. Brian Callahan is the son of a coach. His father, Bill Callahan, was an NFL head coach in his own regard. And so at 10 years old, as Brian shared during the press conference, he is in his dad's office around the game. The quote he gave me to my question was, I know nothing to life other than football. His life has been football. And through osmosis, Brian Callahan feels like he has learned how to lead, how to be consistent in his messaging, how to teach. He mentioned that his style of coaching is that of a teacher, a guy who can tell you and prepare you to do things the right way. He didn't feel like calling plays would be a large transition for him at all. So you never know how a coordinator is going to translate to the job of head coach. Of course, there is always some inherent risk with a first-year head coach. Absolutely no doubt. And there is a chance that Brian Callahan doesn't work out. But I think if you're a Titans fan right now looking for hope, Brian Callahan brings a lot to the table that's really exciting and gives you a lot to be pumped up for. I'm going to play what he said here. And you can get a little bit of insight into what he said about his own coaching style and identity, and then wanting to be like his dad and follow in the footsteps of being an NFL head coach.
My coaching style is consistent. My demeanor is pretty consistent. I pride myself on being a great teacher. That's first and foremost. As a coach, that's all you really care about is how well can you teach and articulate to the players what they need to do. I have plenty of intensity. I'm a pretty laid-back demeanor most of the time, as you guys will see, but when it's time to make corrections and bring the energy that's necessary, I can do that. But my coaching style is a teaching coaching style. We're trying to make sure that our guys know exactly what to do, how to do it, and can go execute at a really high level and as fast as humanly possible. Resilient and relentless. I think that's the easiest way to say it. You want your team to have those two qualities, and if you have those things, if you're resilient, and you can handle the ups and downs, and you can handle the good and the bad, and you're relentless in how you approach every day at work, every day at practice, every game you play, your results they'll come. And if you turn on the tape and you look at the Tennessee Titans, and I hope those are the two words that come to mind.
So there is Brian Callahan on his coaching style and identity. And real quick, want to play a pretty cool moment when reflecting on following in his father's footsteps and becoming an NFL head coach, something not many father-son duos can claim.
I think I asked him, I don't know how many fathers and sons have been head coaches in the NFL. I don't think it's many. And that's a really, I think it's a very prideful thing for him to be associated with, him and I. And I just, it's been a lot. You live this lifestyle, and there's a lot of ups and downs, and there's a lot of adversity that comes your way in coaching. And so, just the fact that I've been able to stand up here, and he's been able to do the same thing, for me, that's a huge honor. Obviously, you want to be like your dad,
What's maybe the most important thing, Brian, you learned?
Cool moment for Brian Callahan. A cool little display of emotion on how much it means to him. And a very unique distinction, being a father-son that have been head coaches in the National Football League. Now the question, hey, Titans fans want to know, is that father coming to be on the coaching staff? Can we get Bill in here to coach up this offensive line? One line that Brian Callahan had in the press conference was like, it's all about hiring the right people, hiring people that you trust. And everybody wants to know, like, hey, let's get your dad in here. Obviously, it would take the Cleveland Browns letting Bill Callahan walk in order to make that reunion happen. But that would certainly be, I think, under the list of every Titans fan of what they'd like to see. Remy says he's under contract. Absolutely true. That's what Brian said regarding the matter when asked about it. He is under contract, and so you cannot just simply go hire him. You would need the Cleveland Browns to say, all right, Bill, given the circumstances, we will allow you to go somewhere else. So perhaps, and Remy says he's not even entertaining the thought. He can't entertain the thought. I guess that would be when he was asked about it. He's not able to speak about it because he's speaking about a coach that is under contract. So for that reason, he has to be careful with what he says. But I do still believe that he would entertain that idea should the Cleveland Browns allow it. We'll see. It's obviously kind of a pipe dream to have one of the best offensive line coaches with head coaching experience and a good relationship with the head coach coming down. Mike says Bill Callahan hasn't won a title. They're using it as a selling point. Who cares? I mean, he's coached in a Super Bowl as a head coach. He has coached the Cleveland Browns to being one of the best offensive lines in the sport over the last 4 years. He has been an offensive line coach for a decade, coaching some of the best units in the league, Mike. So who cares if he's won a Super Bowl as a head coach or not? He coaches good offensive lines. The Titans absolutely need to improve their offensive line, and it starts with the offensive line coach. It starts with their personnel. They need to protect for Will Levis. Bill Callahan can undoubtedly help them do that. I think you are foolish if you don't want Bill Callahan. And somebody says, I'd rather have Munchak. I would take Mike Munchak too, but I think you need a proven offensive line coach. And so I would say that Mike Munchak, Bill Callahan, I don't care who it is. I just want to keep Will Levis standing upright on his 2 feet when he's in the pocket, which brings me to the last video and my last takeaway, which is Brian Callahan's perspective on protection, something he says doesn't just start and stop with the offensive line. It is an all-encompassing thing, which I think showed itself in Cincinnati a good bit.
A lot of things that go into protection. Some of it starts with as simple as you got to go win. You got to win versus tight coverage. Protection is an everybody problem. The quarterback's got to get rid of the ball on time. They have to work through progressions quickly. So to say that it's a specifically the offensive line needs to fix the protection problem, I don't agree with that. I think it's a holistic offensive issue if you have protection problems, and there's a lot of ways you can help weaknesses, highlight strengths, and everybody's involved in the process. As far as profiles of offensive linemen and players, obviously you're looking for the guys that are great at pass pro. You're looking for guys that can anchor, guys that got great length. We'll talk about all the traits at a later date, but schematically you can help a ton. You can chip, you can bang edges. Back's got to be fantastic in pass protection. They got to know who to block and how to block them. So it's a holistic offensive issue, and so our job is to find a way to make sure everyone knows all the specifics of what we're trying to get done, and then they can technically go execute it.
So that is Brian Callahan discussing the Tennessee Titans offensive line and protection in general. An interesting, as he says, it's a holistic thing, right? It involves wide receivers creating separation. It involves wide receivers doing what he mentioned earlier in being selfless and in being involved in the run game, chipping, setting edges, different things schematically that you can do to allow a quarterback to get the ball out of his hands quickly. That shows itself in things with the Cincinnati Bengals, because the Bengals have had one of the worst offensive lines, just talent-wise, over the last few years, and yet they've still been able to have a very explosive, very successful passing offense. They've done a great job with Joe Burrow of figuring out how to get the ball out of his hands quickly and be somewhat productive, despite the fact that the offensive line has failed at times. You see that even dating back to 2021, the year the Bengals go to the Super Bowl. The Titans have something like 8 or 9 sacks in a playoff game on Joe Burrow, and yet they still found a way to create enough explosive offense to win that football game. So what can Brian Callahan bring to offset some potential protection problems or even improve them? I love that when assessing offensive linemen and what he's looking for, Brian Callahan says he's looking for people who can anchor in pass protection. That is essential. That is so key. What was the story with Mike Vrabel? We want guys who can get physical in the run game, who can get quick off the ball, right? Brian Callahan saying, let's anchor down and let's keep our quarterback protected. You are starting to see a shift in philosophy, and I am so excited to see how that translates into player acquisition in free agency coming up in the middle of March, in the draft, as Jordan points out, with a guy like Joe Alt potentially at left tackle. That's looking really, really good right now. And just how he innovates this offense as a whole to support the pass, the same way that I think Mike Vrabel tried to build an offense to support the run. Mike Vrabel built an offense And the Titans, with Mike Vrabel as their head coach and Tim Kelly and Todd Downing as their play callers, built an offense to support Derrick Henry of how can we establish an offensive line that gets off the ball quickly? How can we acquire wide receivers that are good blockers down the field? How can we create tight ends that basically have no receiving value but are just good blockers in like Jeff Swaim's of Trevon Wesco's of the world? And I think now you're starting to see a guy in Brian Callahan who's going to prioritize a running back that can pass protect and be multifaceted and be on the field on third down and catch passes, things that Tajay Spears embodies. Wide receivers that are quick and fast and can separate and can catch, but are also selfless with needing to lay a block or not always getting the ball, that do not demand targets, that do not demand to be the center of attention. And then how he schematically can help Will Levis get the ball out of his hands quicker. It's going to be a fun time. And so I saw a comment earlier that said, it was Anthony said, I want this to work. I do. And Sam, you've made me feel good about this, but time will tell. And he is absolutely right. Time is going to tell here. It's a first-year head coach, and there is risk involved. But it's fun to have hope. And I think right now, Titans fans have a lot of hope about the future. And that starts with Brian Callahan and Ran Carthon and their vision for this organization. So that's all the time I've got for you guys today. There will be so much more coming out of this press conference and more thoughts once I dive into like the quotes and everything that Brian Callahan said. That's all coming on A to Z Sports and atozsports.com. Make sure you guys leave a like on the show before I head out here. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and keep it strapped in on A to Z Sports, like I said. For more information and breakdowns and thoughts about that man right there, new Tennessee Titans head coach, Brian Callahan. Appreciate it as always. Till next time, tighten up. We'll see y'all later.